Hey guys, Justin here, and that is the sound of my washing machine. So I did some research on what was causing that, and I was pretty sure it was bearings, and so I'm going to take apart my washer and figure out how to replace them. So here I'm just taking off the lid of the washer and then the back. And then I'm detaching some of the wires, and the way that I do this is I insert a 6mm socket over the top of those little plastic clips, and that pushes the fingers in so that they can be popped out of the holes in the frame. And next up I am disconnecting the water fill hose, because I basically want to take off that brace in the back, because that's where the wash tub is going to come out of. And then I like to put the screws back in the holes so that I know where they go. And then I just need to take the belt off of the drum and motor pulleys. And that comes off pretty easy. And then now I'm taking off the main drum pulley. And this thing you kind of just have to rock off of there, and it takes some work because it's on there pretty tight, which we want it to be tight fitting. Just have to take your time. Next up, I'm clipping a zip tie that holds the motor cable in place, and then disconnecting the motor, and then I will be taking the motor out. And the way this works is you unscrew those screws, and there's 3 of them. There's 2 in front and 1 in back, and then the motor slides back and then comes off. And then you have to pull that pin right there on the shock absorber, and there's 2 shock absorbers, one on each side of the drum. And so I first pull it out a little bit, and then I have to access the front because it just doesn't pop out. There's actually a tooth that you have to squeeze on the front end of it. It has a latch mechanism that you have to squeeze on the front side of it in order to be able to pull it out the back. So there I'm squeezing it with the front, and I got it moved so that I can get it to come out the back. Now I just move the shock absorber out of the way, and I disconnected the one on the other side as well. Now I'm propping a piece of wood underneath the drum, because when I unhook the springs it's going to be really heavy, but I don't want it to fall to the floor of the washing machine. Now I'm taking off the drain pump hose. So there's a spring that holds this wire around the boot, and so if you can get a hold of the spring, then you can stretch it out and get the wire out from around the boot. and then you just pull on the boot all around the circumference to get it to come off. Now in the top left corner, that's actually where the machine gets filled with water, and so there's actually a little clamp there that holds the boot onto the filler hose, and so you just grab that and twist it and the clamp unlatches. And there the boot comes off of the filler, and that's what the clamp looks like. Now there's a vent hose that's attached to the top of the drum, and you want to take that out of whatever that is that holds the other end of it. Now there's these pieces of metal that go over the springs, and I'm loosening those. Now they're out of the way, and I can unhook one spring. And then I unhook the other spring. And when the springs come off, I actually hook them back into the washer body, and I don't leave them on the drum. So now it's ready to come out. And even though this thing is really heavy, you have to be careful with it so you don't break anything on it. And it has a shaft poking out of the back of it, and you don't want that shaft resting on concrete. And here I'm just unscrewing all the screws that hold the two halves of the drum together. And when you're taking this off, be careful of that gasket. You do not want to damage it. Now, the internal drum was super hard to get out, and I didn't record any of that, but I was beating on it with a hammer on the end of the shaft. I put a piece of wood between the shaft and the hammer, and the drum, when it finally came out, one of the bearings came with it, and it was rusted on the shaft. So here I'm getting my pulley puller out, and I have to say, every time I've gotten this thing out, it's never worked. Like, it pulls fine, but the bearing was just rusted on so tightly that I just couldn't get it to come off. Yeah, so there I was exerting 70 pounds.
70 pounds.
So the only way to get the bearing off is to cut it off with a Dremel, and things just went south from here. So I'm cutting off the inner race, and there's a brass bushing underneath that where the seal that protects the bearings keeps them from getting water. That seal rides on that brass bushing, and I cut into it. So there wasn't any way to replace that brass bushing. I had to buy a whole new stainless steel tub. Now you might ask why I would buy a whole new stainless steel tub. Those are expensive. Why not just buy a new washer? Well, this washer actually has mechanical dials and switches on the front of it, and I and my wife really like that. because you can control the washing machine a lot better than the new washers that just have electronic dials and buttons. So that's why I'm going through the effort to replace the bearings. And then I just pounded the new bearings into the housing. And here I am reassembling the two halves of the drum with the tub inside. Now that it's reassembled, I can put it back in the washing machine. And unhooking this thing was a lot easier than hooking it back up. This thing is really heavy. But I got it hooked up, and then I'm reattaching those metal clips that hold the springs in place. And then I'm putting the back brace back on. Then I'm reattaching the electrical. Then you need to reinstall the shock absorbers down below. I used a 2x4 to pound that thing into place. And then here I'm hooking up the water hose again. Here I'm hooking up the drum vent back up into that holder, whatever it is. Here I'm putting the main pulley back on. And even though I don't get it all the way on the shaft, the bolt will actually seat it correctly. And then I use a piece of wood to keep the pulley from turning while I tighten it up. And here I'm putting the motor back in. And reconnecting the cable to the motor, and then I re-zip tie the cable in place. Here I'm putting the belt back on. And then putting the back onto the washing machine. Now I still have a bunch of work to do on the front, and we'll get to that shortly. So first I have to reconnect the drain hose. And this was a little tricky, but you have to thread the boot back on the tub filler, and then you have to get that clamp back around it, and it takes a little finagling, but it actually wasn't that hard. So once I got it kind of close with my fingers, I was able to hold it with one pair of pliers, and then with another pair of pliers, I latched it. And there it is. Now you just need to seat the boot all the way around onto the front of the washing machine. And once it's fully seated, then you need to get that wire with the spring that holds it in place. And you just stretch that over and put it in the groove, and it's pretty obvious where it goes. And pop the spring in place. And here I'm just checking it. And then reassembling the lower front panel. And then the top goes back on. And here's what it sounds like now versus before. So much better. Hey, do you like these videos? Subscribe. I'll make more. Bye.